When genocide was at its peak, India decided to do an intervention. It was both done on the Eastern Front and the Western Front. The Western Front was not with the idea of doing anything damaging to the Pakistanis. The aim was to contain any aggression that might come out as a result of what might happen to them in the East. In the East, East Pakistan was ingressed by 3 corps. On the western side, there was 2 corps. On the north of that was 33 corps. On the eastern flank was 4 corps. I was part of 4 corps, so I will only talk about the operations of 4 corps led by Sagat Singh, who did a masterful job, and more about it as it unfolds. I was commanding a squadron in Nagaland. It was a Ferret Scout Car squadron of 5 independent armored squadron of 63 cavalry. When we were asked to move to Tripura and convert to PT-76 tanks. PT-76 is a Russian tank and it stands for Plavushi Tanka, implying amphibious tank. We converted, but I did not shed my Ferret Scout cars. I took them along. And when battle started, the PT-76 complement which I was commanding was under 57 Mountain Div, and the Ferret Scout Car squadron, I then called it half squadron, were under 8 Mountain Div, which went all the way to Sylhet. But I am now referring to the PT-76 squadron, which I was part of. So my squadron, having moved in from Nagaland, was although part of 4 corps. Within that, the squadron that I was commanding, PT-76, after conversion from Ferret Scout cars, went to 57 Div. And the other squadron which I shed, which I call the half squadron, was taken by my second in command and was put under command 8 Mountain Div. And surprisingly, I was again asked to shed 1 troop of tanks, which then went towards Komila, which was on the western flank. But the more important part is that till about the 29th of November, I had the task to go to Komila. And suddenly there was a change of plan, and I was told on the evening of 29th, no, on the first morning you will go with 4 guards under 311 Mountain Brigade to Agartala. So I had only 48 hours to prepare, and whatever we could, we prepared. And that's the battle that in memory will be an outstanding example of what good tactics can do at the tactical level. You see, I would call the terrain in Bangladesh as riverine terrain. Either you had big rivers, or you had tributaries, or you had nalas. It was boggy terrain, green everywhere. You could get into a quagmire at any point in time. It was difficult terrain to traverse. It was difficult terrain even for foot soldiers at places. It was difficult terrain for tanks and guns and heavy vehicles. Indeed it was. That's the terrain we were talking about. That's not the terrain we normally train in. And therefore, it was something we had to innovate as we moved along. Although I was placed under command 311 Mountain Brigade as late as 39th or 29th of November, but since I was located in Agartala, the entire brigade group, all its commanding officers, my squadron, we were in regular contact with each other. And off and on, whenever there was an opportunity, we probably had an evening dinner together. My view about the Battle of Akhaura, Agartala is as follows. You see, right opposite Agartala is this township of 10-12 kilometers astride the international border is Akhaura. Pakistanis, I think, had decided that they will hold strong points along the border. And if I recall the Hamadur Rahman committee report, I think they had 28 strong points and 19 other areas from where they would react. This was one of them. So, in preparation for the strong points, they had put out their best troops, their best positions, they had prepared. And I can tell you, since I was only ordered to move in on 29th of November, that on my march to the outflanking of Agartala, they had dug up an anti-tank ditch, which I did not know about. As we entered on the morning of our advance, I got separated from 4 guards because my tanks, one after the other, were caught in the anti-tank ditch. And come morning, their sabers were strafing us. But as soon as we got out of this position of an anti-tank ditch, I closed in with 18 Rajput and supported them in their attack along the railway line. Some bunkers were bothering them, and it was easy for my tanks to blow up those bunkers. And I'm recalling blowing up a couple of them before the 18 Rajput launched their attack, and Akhaura was successfully captured. But from the tactical level, the entire planning that was done by Brigadier Misra and his team, I only joined them much later, was an outstanding example of how, even like a chessboard, you know where the adversary knows where you are, yet you are in a position to checkmate him. That's exactly what happened between Agartala and Akhaura with 311 Mountain Brigade. The artillery fire, the artillery support, the timing of the artillery support, the timing of the air support, the outflanking maneuvers, where we got behind the enemy lines, how he ran away, how he couldn't do anything else. Not only did we achieve in the success of that battle, it generated a sense of panic. Because when you're prepared to hold your strong points, and the strong points fall the way they fell, with minimal casualties to the adversary, the only thing that strikes you is panic. After Akhaura, we continued with 4 guards, moved on to Brahmanbaria. There was another river in between, and they had blown up that bridge. So the infantry, some of them got onto my tanks, and because we had amphibious tanks, we went to Brahmanbaria. Brahmanbaria by then had been vacated, and surprisingly, who told us Brahmanbaria is vacated? Our corps commander and div commander. They already landed there in helicopters. The panic was such that fortified positions had to be evacuated. They were running away for shelter. That's what I want everybody to remember, that when you achieve tactical success, it gives you strategic options. It gives you operational options. But if you dither and hold back, then you're not in a position to exploit it. In this particular case, every bit of time was exploited in chasing the enemy right down to the Meghna River, from where, as I mentioned so many times before, he blew up the bridge. At Akhaura, they had used PT-76 in a dug-up position to fight us. The 10 Bihar, they actually captured a dug-in PT-76 which was firing at us. This was one tank. Later on, as we moved on to Akhaura and Brahmanbaria, there were 2 more that we captured. I understand these PT-76, they had only 7 of them. These were loaned to them by Indonesia as a help, because operations in Bangladesh, then East Pakistan, were of riverine nature, and no other tank would have been suitable for that operation as far as they were concerned. When we were closing in after Akhaura, the 4 guards were moving along the axis of advance, and 10 Bihar and 18 Rajput were moving on the flank along the river line. This is the time when something happens at the operational level and the tactical people get a little upset. What is it that upset us at the tactical level? This is the time when Sagat Singh is deciding to pull out 4 guards from the advance and prepare it for a heli lift. And we in the flank are feeling the pressure of it, because the enemy is now no more worried about the front. And this is where the enemy manages to get together, launches a local counter-attack, which we threw back, and it is in this panic that he blows up the bridge. Because the pressure from the front had to be removed for the larger purpose, which tactically we probably did not understand, and because 2 other things happened. We had an FAC with us, Shaheed was his name, young Shaheed, flying officer, who was injured in the artillery shelling of the adversary. Our guns could not catch up because the in-between nalas and bridges had been blown. So shorn of artillery support, shorn of air support, 18 Rajputs and 10 Bihar are now closing in on the adversary, who then finds the small opportunity to launch a counter-attack with whatever forces he could muster, including PT-76s, which he had with them, which we later captured. This caused a bit of a ripple. 18 Rajputs had to fall back a little bit. I lost 3 tanks. One of my officers was hit. He had burn injuries, survived later on. But this was an action that the adversary managed to take because we were closing in faster than he had anticipated for his withdrawal. So the last rearguard action that they took, we had casualties, they had casualties. And when the bridge was blown, some of them swam across, very difficult. Some of them went on boats and got across to the other side of the river. But that's a story by itself. More importantly, when the Meghna bridge was blown, our corps commander, as I mentioned earlier, was on the, I won't say on the horns of a dilemma, he was at a Y junction. He could have taken one or two options. First was, he had done his task, he's reached the river line, and he would allow the whole army then to mobilize and get to a position which he'd been ordered to do. He was not one of those guys who were willing to not see beyond what was required to be done. It is his estimation that the bridge having been blown up and the adversary not even stirring out of his defenses, this was the time to move beyond. And in the moving of beyond, the only obstacle was the Meghna River. One way to cross the Meghna was to use a helicopter lift, which he had earlier used in Sylhet. What does Sagat do? He gets hold of his Air Force commander, Chandan Singh, and asks him whether a battalion could get across on helicopters. Chandan's answer is yes. I remember somebody mentioning, "Sir, what will happen to ground fire?" And Chandan Singh's response was, "I will be in the first helicopter." That question ended there. He gets to me and says, "Shammi, what about your tanks?" I said, "Sir, I'll give it a try." When you have a commander who is as strong, as willing, as capable, no matter what order he gives you in battle, your answer has to be a yes, sir. I was told at the same time, by the evening, I was told that we are doing a heli lift. We are going to Nursing D. How soon can you get the tanks across? I said, "Sir, I will try." And that effort took one whole evening of reconnaissance, where we can cross. Because as we were trying to enter the Meghna River, it was a quagmire. Tanks were getting stuck because the banks were soggy. They would not take. The per square feet ground pressure developed by a PT-76 is less than that of a loaded soldier. And yet we were getting stuck. Despite that, we managed to get a crossing place. We reconnoitered the areas by which we will land in small islands, and we did what I will later call island hopping. If you go through the literature, at its widest place, I think it's 16 miles, but that is well south-west. At that place, I cannot recall how wide it was. All I can say, because I remember it very distinctly, that I couldn't see the other bank. I had by then 8 plus 3 captured and 8 of my own, 3 which I had lost. They had been refurbished, so I think I had 8 or 9 tanks. We had no recovery. We had no navigation. We did not know what will happen when we are inside the water. But we said we will go. Once you make an entry into the waterline, then you have an idea of what the drift is. And the other tanks, one after the other, get into it because they are amphibious tanks. If the water is not enough, then they get stuck in the sands. But if the water is adequate, then they swim. And they swam across, every island I was praying. I was keeping my fingers crossed. Praying and keeping fingers crossed helped because we crossed. Most part of the day in which we crossed. Most part of the day. We went, we got them together, then we restarted, then we went and we got them together, we restarted. Then when we reached, I think, the other side, then we knew that something was on at the Lt River, and we marched quickly and linked up with 4 guards, commanded by Lieutenant General later, but then Colonel Himmat Singh, CO 4 guards. We are carrying out operations across the Lt River when we hear some noises about ceasefire. But our battle was over. We are just across the enemy, across the, I think it was Adamji jute mills in the area. And from then on, of course, it was like a driving into Dhaka. That's what we did. The journey from the announcement of the ceasefire to Dhaka was, as anything can be memorable as far as the battle is concerned. You cannot imagine the type of happiness that every human being that we managed to meet or see, aged, young, old, everybody wanting to stop the tank, meet the crew, shake hands. Some of them want to kiss them, hug them. We just moved on. And it so happened that when we moved on, I was asked to park in the Dhaka University. And here is an interesting which I must indicate. When we entered Dhaka University, I could see remnants of the slaughtering that happened a couple of days earlier. On the list that everybody talks about, there was a list being carried by Pakistan Army, which are the intellectuals who need to be neutralized. And wonder of wonders, I was commanding Sikh troops, And the squadron enters Dhaka University, and what do I find? A Gurudwara. This is an 1680 Gurudwara where Guru Nanak is the easternmost place he had visited. And there was a Gurudwara there, and the Granthi had been killed. I picked him up. We refurbished the Gurudwara. We got it activated. And I'm glad to say that not only the Gurudwara is still there, and later on we see that it has become larger and bigger and well cared for. So something that is as memorable as can get. We got in touch with Patna Sahib. Guru Granth Sahib was flown out. It was brought in. And the Gurudwara is there for everybody to see now. My squadron was divided into three parts. One was looking after the Intercontinental. The other was looking at the radio station, and the third was looking after the communication center. So I had 3 tanks put in all 3 places. What I did was that I kept a Pakistani captured tank in front of the Intercontinental. Now, Pakistani captured tanks, as different from our tanks, have a stripe along the turret, so you can make out that this is a Pakistani tank. Colonel Himmat and myself, we entered the Intercontinental just to see, because it was our responsibility. They are now declared it as a neutral zone. So everybody inside was to be protected against all those who were having anger against what has happened against them. We go and meet the chef, or he comes to us, he says, will you have a meal? He said, but sir, before you have a meal, I must show you Bhutto suite. There's 555, I think that is the number of the suite which Bhutto had been kept for. We entered there, and unbelievable how, what it was full of, all sorts of things. Now we were looking for a souvenir. Anything that we would touch was expensive. We can't pick up an expensive souvenir. So finally, Colonel Himmat yelled out for me. He said, Shammi, I've got it. I said, so what? We went into the dressing table of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, apparently because it was his suite. And he picked up a comb and gave it to me, but there were 12 combs there. And it's a souvenir because Bhutto was bald. So I till now have a souvenir. I'm sure Himmat and his family are still keeping one. After entering the Intercontinental, I was asked to send a troop of tanks to the airport, where our army commander and earlier the Chief of Staff, General Jacob, had landed. And we were, generally protecting that particular place. And from there, from the airport, they moved on to the surrender ceremony, which happened. And we were asked to get back to the university. And from there, soon enough, after the Army Chief, General Manekshaw, visited us, he told us very clearly that we will be back. And over a staggered time frame, all of us went back, and I think we were back in February or March of 1972. Less than 80 or 90 days of having been in Dhaka. What is in my memory? We went as a force to intervene on humanitarian grounds. We finished our job. We were required to come back. We came back. We went as a liberation force. We did not go as an occupation force. We went to liberate. We did the liberation. And once again, I want to reiterate, with a great contribution from Mukti Bahini. And we came back the way we went. And I think that itself is a lesson in itself. When you go for a purpose, you get back after the purpose is done, and you do not then begin to look for, what do I get out of this? There was no getting anything out of it. We didn't get anything out of it except to ensure that the rest of the population were kept away from this ever-galloping genocide.